Starting in the name of Allah, the most merciful, mighty, and gracious to all. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and welcome to the class of management. Dear students, today we are going to discuss the last lecture of the course, and that is controlling. Dear students, we started the 5 major activities, functions of a management. Our first function, that was planning. Then we discuss organizing. Then we discuss staffing, then leading, and today we are going to discuss about controlling, that what controlling is. Now let's start from the first, that what is controlling or what is control. If you focus on the definition, that controlling, it is simply the process of monitoring activities to ensure that they are being accomplished as planned and of correcting any significant deviations. If I would like to simply explain this definition of controlling, I can simply state it that controlling, it is a function or it is a process that is used to find out what is done and what was to be intended. It is simply a method, a process which is undertaken to ensure that results conform to the plan. It simply means that whatever we had planned, our activities, the current activities, are with according to the plan or not. So when a process monitors their activities, that whatever we have planned and our current activities are with according to that plan, so that process of monitoring is simply known as controlling. मतलब controlling से controlling simply means कि आया सीजुना ज़मूं plan पर मुताबिक दी कनरी. Come che mung mean we are talking about the organization, we are talking about the managers, is it? Whatever the plan done by the organization or made by the organization, either things are according to that plan or not. मतलब ज़वाया I want to secure 95% mark, or I want to get 95% mark in the subject. I studied a lot, but let's suppose unfortunately I don't get marks clear 95. The question is that why I didn't get the marks 95? Because clear I did a lot of effort clear I put, but why I didn't get clear 95% marks? It means that I planned something else, and my current activities, these are not with according to my plan. So a process that where we monitor our activities, we monitor the things that either they are with according or they are same as we made in the plan or not. तो कल ज़मूं सीजुना ज़मूं activities plan पर मुताबिक दी कनरी दे दे पारा मैनेजरान organization your monitoring process जुड़े, and that process is simply known as controlling. Now they're common there. A purpose there to ensure that activities are completed in ways that lead to accomplishment of organizational goals or not. हदफ से controlling हदफ दा दे basically चे आया organizational goals तरला सा शवी दी कन्नदी. If कन्नदी तरला सा शवी, no वली नदी तरला सा शवी, गए कि कम यो deviation रहा गले दे. No आया कारुना तकमील शवी दी, और पा आगा तरीके मने तकमील शवी दी, चे कम the organizational goals achievement दे पारा helpful दी. Like for example, गोरा यो organization दे या sales department दे. अब sales department they with the intention that they have to increase their sale in this month, yeah, in this year. At the end of the month they have to judge the sale. चे आया वाकी sale increase शवे दे कहना हाँ के they clear define a goal that they will increase the sale. Suppose if the sale is increased, now simply stated that the current activities, they are definitely matching with their plan, with their goal. It means they have achieved the goals. Lekin suppose they didn't achieve the goal at the end of the month, now they are going to study that why they didn't achieve the goal. सही हुआ د دې اکټیویټیز ولې انهانس د دې سیلز ولې انهانس شوی نه دی. نو اولنی هدف خو دا ده چې ګوره کنټرولینګ چې کوم دی هغه بیسیکلی اکټیویټیز مانیټر کوي. مانیټرینګ نه دوی خبرې کلیر کیږي. 1 چې آیا کار تکمیل شوی دی که نه دی تکمیل شوی. اف که تکمیل شوی دی صحیح شو so it will be according to the goal, desired goal of the organization, desired plan of the organization or not. And second is not, let's suppose. So بیا ولې نه دی. What is the reason? What is the variation? صحیح شو اول خو یو دا هدف دی. Second هدف چې why it is important. No, important خو ځکه دی چې because that is plan. As I told you چې planning او controlling چې کوم دی دا سراسره دي. Without controlling چې دی plan effective نه دی. Or without planning چې کوم دی هغه controlling effective نه دی. So the controlling چې کوم دی it let managers know whether their goals and plans are on target and what future actions to be taken. نو یو خدا دا چې controlling سره تاسو planning او planning سره تاسو controlling صحیح شو دا نورم effective شي. صحیح شو. Second, empowering employees. Control systems provide managers with information and feedback on employee performance. Now, as I told you, Chigura controlling very muhim de because it consists the measurement, the measuring performance of subordinates through managers. It also definitely will make some corrective action if necessary to reach the planned objectives. Now, controlling system chikam de the employee performance babara ke feedback workai the gala managers ta. No zaka hum controlling system chikam de aga effective de. Kura mata chi pata da, for example, if I know that there is a consistent performance appraiser or the of employees inside the organization. Matlab if I know che management chikam de they will definitely take care the employee performance. They do the employee performance in the organization. نو زه به کوشش کوم چې ما ارزیابي به کیږي نو definitely I will prove myself. زه به خامخا خپل پرفارمنس چې دی امپروو کوم او په دې معنی چې بیا فیډبیک ملاویږي نو بیا به زه نور مهنت کوم. Why? Because I know this thing. صحیح شو. That is a question on my image. نو ځکه دا وایي چې کنټرولینګ سره امپلوي پرفارمنس چې کوم دی صحیح شو هغه هم امپروو کیږي just because of the feedback with proper information cues. بل امپورټنٹ څه دی چې protecting the workplace. Simply stated, control enhance physical security and help minimize workplace disruptions. اوس ګوره کنټرولینګ سره چې کوم دی هغه ستاسو د کوم چې ورکپلیس مطلب ارګنایزیشن یا ورکپلیس صحیح شوله چې کوم رولز ریګولیشنز دي صحیح شوله هغه هم ورسره ډېر سټنډرډایز شي. لکه سپوز زه وایم چې any of the individual is not performing well. Now this time organization will not clear issue the bonus to them. مطلب هغه کس چې پرفارمنس ښه نه ورکوي نو ارګنایزیشن به هغې ته څه کوي ارګنایزیشن به هغې له بونس نه ایشو کوي. یا چې د پیپل هو آر ناٹ ارایوینګ ټو د ارګنایزیشن اٹ ټایم مطلب هغه کسان چې ارګنایزیشن ته په ټایم نه راځي نو ارګنایزیشن ول ډیډکټ د سیلري. صحیح شو دا ټول رولز ریګولیشن دي. اب ګوره سیکنډ مهم صحیح شو ځکه دی ولې چې ارګنایزیشن کې چې څومره ډسټربنس دی ارګنایزیشن کې چې څومره ډسټربشنس دی صحیح شو مطلب رولز اینڈ ریګولیشن. نو رولز اینڈ ریګولیشنز چې کوم دی دا هم کنټرولینګ سره صحیح شو دغه کیږي نورم مثبت شي. نو ځکه پروټیکټینګ د ورک پلیس د کنټرولینګ will also protect clear the workplace. Ab we are talking about the planning and controlling link. چې آیا planning controlling څنګه link دي لکه څنګه چې ما تاسو initially I said to you that planning and controlling they are parallel. Parallel mean چې څوره planning شي او controlling هم شي. Without planning controlling is nothing and without controlling planning is nothing. They are interlinked. دا یو بل سره link دي. نو څنګه link دي ګوره planning will lead to the organizing. Organizing will lead to the leading and leading will lead to the controlling. مطلب controlling چې کوم دی صحیح شو دا push ورکوي planning لا. Planning is what? Planning is about goals, objectives, strategies and plans. دا خو هر څه موږ ډسکس کړي دي. Once چې planning وشي now the managers move to the next that is organizing. That how to structure the things. Is it? What about the human resources? Come your cus for example come your job book. Which person is more suitable for what type of job? Again organizing. Departmentation څنګه کی کارونه به څنګه responsibility به چاله ورکو. Is it? څوک په مخې لرازي څوک بهترین د دې جاب دی پاره چې کله once structuring ushi. The next thing is leading. Bia de staso sara leading. Us leading, how to motivate the people. What about the leadership style? What about the communication? What about the individual behavior, group behavior? Team bu sanga judegi, group bu sanga judegi. Sechwa individual perception se. Once it is clear, so the next thing is controlling. Bia rashi controlling ta. Uskura planning, bia organizing, leading or bia controlling. It means planning or controlling the yobal sara touch di. These are connected. अब प्लानिंग के मुंह से को पूरा प्लानिंग के स्टैंडर्ड्स हासिल की अवल स्टैंडर्ड्स ब्या मेजरमेंट्स ब्या कंपैरिजन एंड ब्या एक्शंस सही हुआ अब कंट्रोलिंग ओवरऑल योर प्रोसेस थे एज आई टोल्ड यू दैट कंट्रोलिंग इज अ प्रोसेस नो उस द प्रोसेस चदे इट कंटेन्स सम स्टेप्स व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट प्रोसेस so process simply stated that is a series of steps. It contains some further steps. And these steps are number one, that under controlling managers develop standards, then they do measurements, then they do comparisons, and then they do actions. First of all, standards are to be established. What is standard? أول بذا مخكي راسي إن شاء الله بذا detail كي تشري كوما لكن دلتا يو idea در كوما تتاسو idea clear شي. What is standard? Standard this. Standard simply it is a criteria. It's a condition. Suppose I would like to give an example. Suppose if you want to check the temperature of an individual, God forbid, any of the individual, any of the person, he or she is suffered from temperature. Your kaste agita tabada, and you want to check clear his or her temperature. When you checked his or her temperature, you need an instrument, and that instrument is thermometer. To thermometer, you will find out the person is, for example, suffered in fever or not. Once you, let's suppose, check his or her temperature, you got that the person has a temperature 102. Is it? For example, how you got that the person agila bukhar de tabada temperature is 102? It means that you have compared this clear with a criteria, and the criteria is that a normal body temperature is 98 degrees Celsius. So it means that you have checked 102, you have compared 102 with a standard body normal body temperature, and a normal body temperature is 98. So now look at here, when you compare 102 with this 98 is known as a standard. They tamunga wayu standard, a criteria to whom you are going to match your, for example, performances. Like that's why suppose, sir, Tariq is one of the best teacher in BBA department. Suppose it's an example. What you are doing, that's why we want to check clear every teacher with Sir Tariq. We want to compare every teacher with Sir Tariq. It means Sir Tariq is a criteria where you are going to judge all the teachers with Sir Tariq. Sorry, not judge, you can compare. Now the Sir Tariq clear you, for example, you people have taken Sir Tariq as a standard. So standard simply saso sara your criteria da che this sara saso, for example, matching code. Bya the measurements. What actually you want to measure, what and how. Measurements variables saso study code. Like for example, you want to measure the individual absenteeism, you want to measure the individual satisfaction, you want to measure the individual turnover, the individual motivation level. That are tool seasonally which you want to measure. Now next we have comparison. Us munga se ko munga comparison ko. Comparison means simply that actual performances these are compared clear with your standard. And biachede after that comparison with the standards, then actions are to be taken. Now gura the controlling chekam basically process te sehwa that comes in start kegi. It basically involves the following steps, like establishing the standards, then measuring the performances, then the comparison of actual and planned performances, then upon the comparison, then managers take corrective actions which ensure the implementation of corrective actions. And here I told you about the standards. Well, there are so many types of standards. Gura, it can be physical standards. Like simply physical standard means non-monetary measurements, yeah, non-monetary standards. Mostly at the operating level are implemented. Like materials are used, labor employed, services are rendered, goods are produced. Is it? Yeah, dena ilawa labor hours, unit produced. Is it? All these are simply the physical standards. Sometimes we have the cost standards, financial standards हम करते हुए मक्की बराजी भी बता इंशाल्लाह डिटेल के क्लियर हम कम. Like for example monetary measurements, mostly common at the operating level. Like for example direct indirect cost per unit produced, labor cost per unit or yeah, per hour, material cost per unit, is it, and machine labor cost. Then ilawa we have revenue standards. Like let's suppose these are the arise from attaching monetary value to sales, including standards as like average sale per customer. We have some intangible standards like competence, yeah, compatibility of personal director, competence clear of a purchase agent, yeah, dena ilawa loyalty of a supervisor of a company's objectives. Sometimes we have goal also as a standard. Benchmarking is also clear a type of standard. So there are so many different standards. सही हुआ. अब स्टैंडर्ड्स के controlling process के, as I told you controlling मुक्सरा ये overall process थे comes in start कीगी. It basically start from establishing the standards, then capture the performance, and performance should be match clear with the actual standards, and upon clear comparison ब्याच कम दे corrective actions are to be taken. उस the overall चिकम process थे I have split up into 3 steps. Measuring the actual performance as I told you, then comparing actual performance with the standards again, सही हुआ मगा खबरा, and then some actions are to be taken, corrective actions are to be taken. लोगों 3 steps के the overall process मता सुतरा discuss करो. Number 1, measuring the actual performance, मतलब टोलो ना पहला standards, is it? After the standard, measure the actual performance of the individual. अब this performance should be compared with the standards. No, अव्वल से measuring the actual performance. Second, comparison. Comparison of what? Comparison of your actual performance with the standards. जिसका मास्टर पर खबर उकरा. That is step 2. And then चिकम दे managers take corrective actions. Now there are 3 stages दी. उस number 1 खबर अदा को चे actual performance. First, I would like to explain step number 1, and that will be about the actual performance measurement. Then we will move to the step number 2, that what actually or how comparison, simply comparison माने मतलब discussion उको, चे comparison संगा की, how actual performances will be definitely match with the standards or compare with the standards, and then corrective actions माने बखबर उको, is it? Now let's start from the first, that is measuring actual performance या actual performance simply. अब कल when we are talking about measurement, measuring of actual performance, अब actual performance के 2 concept दी, how and what to measure. अवल खबर खुदा दा चे how we will measure. For example, as I told you that we want to measure the performance of an individual. Now अवल question दा दे चे that how we have to measure the performance of individual. With the help of personal observations, manager do personal observations about the people, about the employees, some statistical reports, some oral reports, matlab for example discussions, journal discussion, and some written reports like essay appraisal, forms वगैरह. Now these are the different techniques with the help of which clear we can measure the individual actual performances. अब the question is what we measure. मतलब मुझको performance measure को अवल question दा दे चे को वे संगा how. Now how हमारा so it has so many different ways, so many different methods. अब what we have to measure, मुझ बच्चे measure करूँ. Definitely we have to measure some variables. Is it? आखिर कम variables की देशी. It can be constructs, as I told you. अब now we have to measure what? What we have to measure? ज़ता सवाल माँ. I want to measure employee, for example. अब question दा दे सर तासो माना तपोस कोई I want to measure employee. अब employee what? So definitely we have to measure some different variables, different criterias. अगर से की देशी अगर employee satisfaction की देशी, it can be employee absenteeism, it can be employee turnover, is it? ګوره absenteeism مطلب رخصتین چې یو امپلای سره رخصتي کوي. turnover simply means that people leaving the organization مطلب خلک چې دی هغه organization نه سپیل کیږي مطلب organization پریدي وزي that is known as turnover. satisfaction تاسو ته خو پته ده. then sometimes صحیح شوله budget can be measured. budget چې دی for example هغه cost مصرف په صورت راغلی دی sales صورت شوی ده صحیح شوله organizational output یا employee output productivity effectivity صورت ده. so all these are different variables. نو کله هم چې مونږ وایو we want to measure صحیح شوله the actual performances. نو اول question دا راشي سر چې what we want to measure is it یا how we want to measure and what we want to measure مونږ څه پکې measure کول غواړو and these are simply known as your different variables. hope inshallah a bit idea به تاسو clear شوی همي. اوس now that is your second stage, second step, that is comparison یا comparing actual performance with your standards. شروع کې ما تاسو ته دا خبره وکړه چې initially first you have to measure is it and in measurement you have to study that how to measure and what to measure. once you are complete enough about clear measurement, now we will move to the second stage and that is comparing simply means that measurement of actual performance with your standard. Yeah, capture your actual performance and then compare with your standards. So that process is simply known as your comparing process. And now let's see more under comparison کې بل نور وګورو چې comparison کې څه سره دي. determining the degree of variation between actual performance and the standard. अब as I told you چې comparing څه دی comparing simply actual performance is it and standard د دوی comparison دی. when we compare actual performance with standard is it that process is simply known as your comparing. अब why we do comparing because we want to find out the variation. अब what is variation? ګوره variation simply mean change. لکه زه تاسو ته وایم suppose I have 10 rupees general example دی بیا مخکې تاسو example در کومه like advance او ما سره شپږ rupees دي صحیح شو. نو دې تر منځ کې ټوټل 4 روپو ګیپ دی 4 روپو ګیپ دی. there is for example a gap of 4 rupees. it means that the 4 is a variation between these two let's suppose point صحیح شو. نو actual performance and standard صحیح شو دې تر منځ کې ګیپ چې کوم دی that is called variation. اوس comparison اکثر مطلب comparing اصل هدف هم دا دی چې once the manager they capture the actual performance of an individual they will definitely compare with the standards. why? because they want to study variations. صحیح شو. अब significance of variation is determined by the acceptable range of variation from the standard. yani for example زه تاسو یو example درکم دا وایي چې کم هم variation let's suppose چې راشي کم یو change چې راشي अब دا change چې کوم دی it must be defined by چې دا acceptable range صحیح شو of variation. لکه زه تاسو ته وایم suppose چې یو assembly line دی الته خلک چې کوم دی مزدوران چې کوم دی صحیح شو هغه packing کوي. अब packing کې چې دی صحیح for example بوجي ډکوي غټي بوجي ډکوي څه packing کوي about the products. अब सब products کې زیات اچي صحیح شو څه مطلب څه بوجو کې زیات مال اچي او څه کې کم اچي صحیح شو. अब suppose ما وې چې هغوی let's suppose یو بوجي چې کم دغه دی وزن دی it must be 400 let's suppose kg. یو general example در کوم 400 kg is the let's suppose دا د تاسو سره 400 kg clear is the weight of your that بوجي صحیح شو. دا کم چې بیگ دی it weight must be 400 kg. अब 400 kg के वेरिएशन मतलब څوک پکې زیات اچي څوک پکې کم اچي. अब ګوره پلس ماینس صحیح شو ویریشن چې دی دا ایکسپټیبل دی. मतलब فور ایگزامپل 400 دا د تاسو سره 400 صحیح شو. अब 400 کې چې پلس 8 کې صحیح شو نو it means the یو بوجي چې ډکې هغه موستلی 405 صحیح شو پورې ایکسپټیبل دی. او بیا چې ماینس کې मतलब 395 is it that is the weight the limits see lower limit and upper limit मतलब मजदूरान स्टैंडर्ड से दे 400 kg. अब वेरिएशन थोड़ा पर एक्सेप्टेबल दे च मतलब 405 पर यो बोझे तासो डकवले शी. Is it अखी वेट खैर दा doesn't matter या च डेर कमई नो 395 सही शवा kg पर अगे वजन पकार दे सही शवा नो बाइक च 395 ना कम वेरिएशन रानशी सही शवा वजन राशि रानशी and 405 ना च दे ज्यादा रानशी. Are you getting my point? When I said to you that when actual performance is standard clear, that is basically accepted, that is basically mentioned by the manager. Like for example, that in assembly line, the employees, the workers, they are fulfilling some bags and the standard weight is 400 kg of each bag. Up now the variation clear, it must be acceptable, it must be defined. Up defined variable is defined range is what variation range I'm talking about. That manager said that when workers, you for example fulfill the bag, so the variation, the weight shouldn't be more than 405 kg and it shouldn't be less than 395 kg. Is it? So it means that this is -5 and that is +5 variation. Is it? So comparing chicken process, it basically used to acceptable range of variation. Matlab your variation chicken de, your change chicken de from the actual point, it must be defined. Then it says the size and the direction of the variation from the standard. Ab sometime the size, it can be the large, it can be the small, and sometime the direction, matlab over and under, it must be explained through comparison purpose. Ab sanga, let me give you an example. Sometime sanga munga over and under ki deshu. Let me explain this concept from an example. That was also your example, sara clear shi. Suppose Gore, if you focus that this line, this black line, is it? It is known as your standard. That is standard. Suppose this black line, it is a standard, and as I told you that the standard is 400 kg of each bag. Up this dotted red line, that is known as your 405 weight of each bag. This is your upper limit. It means bag shouldn't be exceed its weight clear from 405 kg. Ubda is taso sara 395. Is it? Pinzate manfi kai. For example, this is your lower limit. This black line is your standard, suppose, and from standard up to this red line, here it is. Da chikam de. This is your upper limit, matlab +5 limit. Oh, da chikam de taso sara this lower red line. This is your lower limit. Is it? It means that the standard is 400 kg. This is acceptable lower limit 395 and this is acceptable upper limit, that is 405. Ab mazduran, they are fulfilling clear the bags. Is it? Ab this 405 is the upper variation and this 395, that is the lower variation, matlab -5 and upper 5. Ab bags clear, it must be between these two ranges. If it is below this range, so it means that is not acceptable. If it is above the range, again that is a deviation, something is going wrong. If the bag clear weight is between 405 and clear 395, so it means that is within the range, so that is acceptable. Are you getting my point? So gora the point chikam de, the gora highlight shavende from this up to this, this range is your acceptable variation. Kadi ke danna de acceptable, kade danna na bahar de so not acceptable. So it means that variation is then not identified. So that de parabya corrective action ba akhli manageran. Gora andaha, suppose your example is clear kama che significant variation se matlab shu dalta. It simply means gora I have different, for example, the factors, yani vegetable plants, the plants, annual flowers, for example, flowers, herbs, flowering herbs, bushes, seeds, blah blah blah. Ab gora the standards. Is it? These are the standard fixed by the Green Earth Gardening Supply your company da, and that is the June sale. Say shwa. Ab the standard se saath le 1075. Ab actual sale happened say shwa 1913. Say shwa 913. Ab that is actual sale and that was the standard. Ab if you focus say shwa, that is, it means 162 chede da kambutte say shwa actual na. It means it is known as your under sale shavede. Ab if you focus standard was 630. It means that these flowers, perennial flowers, they had the standard that they will sell 630. लेकिन what happened at the end of the June, they sold total 634. मतलब 4 च कम they extra खर्च करी दी. That is known as your over. Now concept is clear. So sometime variation, it also give us the idea, या comparison च कम comparing, it gives us the idea about the over and about the under. Hope inshallah idea will be clear to you. Up the next step, the third step, that is taking corrective actions. If variations clear are in the acceptable area, no bya kho sahi de. Lekin if variations are not in the acceptable area, something is going wrong. So now managers chikam de, they must have to take some actions. That was steps ali. Now our step khuda de, if everything is according to the plan, every variation is according within the range, no, it means nothing to do by the managers. Simply, if let's suppose something is going wrong, matlab actual performances and current performances, there is a more deviation, doi ke fark de. No, we are taking managerial actions, immediate corrective actions to correct the problem at once. We are manager chikam de, agab step ali that how to correct these, for example, actions. How to, for example, correct these deviations. Up the basic corrective actions to locate and to correct the source of the variation. Sirf steps banakli to control, for example, the variation. Also find out the way, for example, what is the reason of this deviation. Like suppose the your customer, he is not clear coming to the organization or office clear at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock organization office se nashi raat le. Sahi hua? Halanki time chikam de aga 8 o'clock de. Ab suppose aga customer nashi raat le, definitely the actual performance, sahi hua, there is a variation in actual performance and standard. No, us gora wajah sada ki deshi age core lare nashi raat le, is it? So then they have to find out the source, the reason that why this deviation is occurring. Up in this regard, managers have to take the different corrective actions. Sometimes they can change the strategy, sometimes they can change the structure, sometimes some compensation schemes, sometimes, for example, training programs they have to alter, sometimes redesign the jobs, or sometimes might be hire some more employees, is it, and fire some employees. That is clear up to the situation. Suppose संग चमस्ता हुए student the employee ने अगर 8 बजे चले organization तक नशी रात ले तो शुला हालांकि 8 चकम दे 10 standard time दे अब चाहे नशी रात ले लोगे वजह से दा कि देशी for example अगर कस कोर चकम दे तो शुला अगर organization न लरे दे अगर time मने नशी राती दे नो बिया बाइट organization तो कि बाइट organization अगला transport provide की अब that is again a strategy. The basically compensation scheme ki raji, lekin it can be the strategy for the in such situation. Now all these are simply the corrective actions, and different corrective action should be taken in the different situations. Sometime standards should be revised. Kala chikam the standards organization satari, as I told you the criteria chikamada, it must be revised. It must be glanced by the by the managers. Examine the standards to ascertain whether or not the standard is realistic, fair or achievable or not. मतलब अवल खुदा ना चिदा कम च standard सातरी दी आया आगा standards च कम दे आगा fair दे आगा realistic दी आगा achievable दी कनदी. Like संग च मासा so for example, च one of the employee, he is not coming to the organization at 8 o'clock, is it? Might be his house is far away from the very far away from the office, so it means he cannot appear to the office at 8 o'clock. It means that this standard 8 o'clock clear, that is not a realistic. The you realistic nadi. No, first they must have to manager must have to measure the revise the standard. Then sometime upholding the validity of the standard. Whatever the standard fixed by the managers, is it valid or not? Like for example, you want to check the motivation level. No, that's why your customer, for example, Mr. A, he is coming to office at 8 o'clock. نو تاسو وایي چې 8 o'clock باندې چې دا کس Mr. A چې کوم دی organization ته راځي نو he is very motivated individual. Up doesn't mean that 8 o'clock clear is only the sign of motivation. Motivation نورم ډیر د sign کیدی شي. It doesn't mean that 8 o'clock چې یو کس organization ته ضرورت وي صحیح شو هغه ډیر زیات motivated دی. یا زه دا وایم شمه that who for example manager وایي چې we want to check that which person, which individual, which employee is more productive. अब manager वही چې هغه کسان چې they coming to office early and they for example leave to home let's suppose late. So it doesn't mean the people who are coming early and for example leaving office late clear per day they are very motivated कि देश यो कस ज़रूर सी late सी अगीना कार न कीगी. He is unable to proceed clear his work or wind up his work clear on time. So it doesn't mean that they people are productive. So sometime might be the standards सही it must be valid in nature. چې कम standard दे आया अगर सही दे अगर correct लगे study कई करना कई सही validity पकिश्ता दुरुस्तगी पकिश्ता के नश्ता. So it means 8 o'clock माने रातलल. It doesn't mean that the person is motivated. So it means 8 o'clock is not a real valid thing for to measure motivation. Sometimes resetting goals that were initially set too low or too high. ورا कला goals چې کوم دی صحیح شو هغه منیجران چې کوم دی ډیر لو یا ډیر های وساتي. سپوز अब یو نوې کس دی a new let's suppose internally hired by the marketing department internally صحیح شو MTOs management training officer मतलब یو نوې کس دی he is under the training. अब منیجران چې کوم دی अब because he is fresh صحیح شو he has know a lot of experience that how to sell the products. अब organization के manager थ्रू की manager अगे दे पर target set की within a month you have to sell 150 units or 150 products. Ab Gora, the person is completely fresh, he is new, he has no idea that how to sell the product. Ab suddenly when manager hit a target and that target is very high that within a month you must have to sell 150 units. Halanki actual experience employees they are selling 150 units per month. Ab for a fresh person this target is too much high. So definitely what will be happen it is not realistic صحیح شو for a new person انشي کوله. نو ځکه دا وایي چې whatever the standards are basically developed by the managers they must have to revise the standard چې either these standards are valid, these standards are achievable, these are fair or not. صحیح شو simply stated آسان کو concept है دوره difficult نه دی ان شاء الله idea به تاسو clear شي. अब now we are going to discuss that under the controlling process what about the managerial decisions. Yes, simply managerial decisions in the controlling process. It starts from the first that is first the individual your managers they basically develop some objectives. Ab objectives se manager has an objective that he or for example she want to measure the performance of the individual. Ab that is the objective of a manager. For this objective organization inside the organization the manager has set clear a standard. उस अंदर एग्जांपल به زمخ کې یو سم چې تاسو له کانسپټ نورم اسانه شي. سپوز مینیجر وای چې زه د خپل امپلوي پرفارمنس چک کول غواړم. ا پرفارمنس لپاره هغه سټانډرډ سیټ کړی دی چې each for example employee must appear to the office at 8 o'clock. अब the 8 o'clock چې کوم دی it's a standard. अब ګوره next step کې څه دی measure actual performance. अब यो कस چې کوم دی one employee he is coming to the office at 8 o'clock. One person for example is coming to the office at 7:50. One individual is coming to the office at 10 or at 5 or 8:02. अब every individual صحیح شو अब هغه actual performance چې کوم دی صحیح شو arrival time چې کوم دی that will be measured by the manager. अब if the actual performance صحیح شو here now the manager measure the actual performance of the individual. Now here the actual performance should be matched with the standards. ګوره دلته یو individual چې کوم دی هغه let's suppose په 8:02 باندې راغی. अब actual time څه دی 8. یو کس چې دی for example هغه 7:50 باندې راغلی. let's suppose sorry it's not working. یو کس چې دی هغه organization ته په 7:50 باندې راغلی. صحیح شو 7:50. अब what does it mean 7:58 these are your actual performances. अब the manager is comparing actual performance with the standard and standard is 8 o'clock. صحیح شو here here in this step, that compare actual performance with the standard. अब question is standard being attained? आया individual च कम दे standard for example अखस से दे मतलब standard match करे दे कने दे करे. If the individual, if the employees, they have, let's suppose, attained the standard, is it they are with according to the standard, no ब्याखो do nothing. Managers for example मतलब if employees are coming at 8 o'clock to the organization ब्याखो हर से सही दे variation नश्ता, no manageran चे they do nothing, they will is corrective action ना आखरी. Why? Because everything is systematic. Employees, they are with according to the standard. लेकिन suppose if the standard is not matched, here we are in the no condition now. If standard is not matched, so now the next thing is variance acceptable? आया कम कसन variation को accept शी करना. Let's suppose तासु वही जो गोरा 8 o'clock standard दे, no तासु वही जो for example कम अस कम student employees चे कम दे, they must appear to the organization at 8:10. By 8:10 ना का कम late रहा है सही शो no मुंबई बरता fine work हो. अब दा कम चे 8:10 दे leverage, that is variation. अब variation is defined or not? Is variance acceptable? If variance for example यो कस चे दे अगा 8:5 माने रागो, यो कस 8:7 माने रागो, no मतलब दल तपुर खुता सो वेला acceptance work करे दे. No, it means yes variance is acceptable. No ब्या को do nothing again, so variation corrective action जरूरत नश्ते दे. लेकिन for example उस दल ता variance is not acceptable. सही हुआ मतलब यो कस चे कम दे अगा let's suppose पर 8:20 माने रागे out of the leverage रागे. It means again your cus 820 माने राग है, not according to 8. अब क्वेश्चन दल दा दे आया दा वेरिएशन चिकम दे your cus चिकम दे वेरिएशन डेढ़ ज्यादा थे 8:10 पर मा टाइम वर्क करे दे और एम्प्लॉइज चिकम दे they are not appearing on the 8:20. So why they are not appearing on the 8 or 8:10? What is the reason? आया दा कम चिमा 8 times आता ले दे. Is it correct? Is it valid? So now here is variance acceptable? If yes, so do nothing. Manager will do nothing. If let's suppose the variance is not acceptable, so then we have to focus on our standard, that either our standard is acceptable matlab we have to revise standard. If yes, according to all organization 8 is a standard time, that is acceptable. Ratleshi matlab udi atdi no byahu saida doesn't matter. So then sayshwala byahu isum na kai. Lekin for example if this standard is not acceptable, so then we have to revise the standard. लेकिन if this standard is acceptable मतलब च दा standard 8 सही दे, no then managers must have to identify the cause. आखिर वजह से दा the variation, why the person is not coming, why the employee is not coming clear at 8 or 8:10, why he is every time coming at 8:20. So then there they have to identify the reasons of this variation and then they will take the corrective action. Hope inshallah that the overall diagram namasasula idea clear shawi. Now dear students, the example I have given to you, I took a very simple example just to make your idea clear. Is it? It doesn't mean that you must have to be sticky with my example. That's sirf the example so idea clear kawalo de para about this diagram. That's what example sabbal example hum akhaste shi. Sahi sho? Sirf ma hadaf daw that the most things should be clear to you in a very simple way. Now for controlling organizational performance, we need okay, I think there is a problem in Microsoft, let me check. Okay students, now we are actually connecting organizational performance and controlling, or how to controlling we can enhance organizational performance. Now let's start. First we have the organizational productivity. What is productivity? Productivity simply means that it is the ratio of output and input. Yeah, simply you can say that a ratio of input to the output. The overall output of goods or services divided by the inputs needed to generate the output. And output can be the sales revenue, and inputs can be the cost of resources like materials, labor, expense and facilities. First of all, simply stated that to enhance organizational productivity through controlling, the first thing is organizational productivity. And organizational productivity will lead us clear about the employee efficiency. Like suppose for example your employees were efficient show, so calculate its productivity. suppose the tere میاشتې productivity and this time productivity د دې میاشتې productivity. Like for example, if you want to calculate the efficiency clear of an individual, so you must have to calculate its last month productivity and about clear his or her this month productivity. Now you have to compare both months productivity. If the current productivity is higher clear than the last productivity, matlab where you are going to compare two productivities with one another, and upon that clear you can say that this time our employee is more productive. Now us the productivity چې کوم دی صحیح شولا about any of the department, any of the individual, any of the group, any of the organization, you can calculate صحیح شولا. So first productivity will give you the idea. Then we have organizational effectiveness, that measuring how appropriate organizational goals and how well the organization is achieved its goals. Matter either organization has achieved its goals or not, simply that is known as organizational objectives. Then we have some system resource model, and we also have the process model. Let me explain very simply that what is system resource model. System resource model simply stated that organizations, they have the limited resources. So how limited resources they can achieve, simply this model is known as your system resource model. मतलब गोरा organization आगा काबिलियत चेकम के organization from the external environment, they can get clear the very scarce resources. The system model simply da way च आगा resources चेकम देर scarce थी चेकम कम्बुत थी. No organization संगा आगा कम्बुत सही external environment ना आगा resources चेकम दे external environment ना दाखिल तरा वस्तेशी. How organization, so the capability of an organization that from the external environment the scarce resources should be get by the organization, that is simply known as the system resource model. Like for example, this is how your organization chikam de aga your talented human resources baharna organization tarawasteshi, simply that is known as system resource model. So now look at the definition: the ability of the organization to exploit its environment in acquiring scarce means kambut, and valued resources. We have the process model. By the name it is clear, process. Process simply means the scarce resources organization tarashi. Once these scarce resources are clear acquired by the organization or bring to the organization, how effectively organization can put these resources into the process, and they can get more clear from these resources. So that is simply known as process model. मतलब कि सूरा कम्बुत resources organization तरला सकी और दे कम्बुत resources ना organization सूरा process की गटा खस्तेशी सूरा output ते अखस्तेशी. That is simply known as process model. Like for example गोरा ये organization दे सहीशुआ अगे तो technical engineers न मिलावेगी बाहर न दिल पर मुश्किल मने सहीशुआ they acquired the people from the external market. उसे hire कर no उस organization देना दन्ना सूरा गटा खस्तेशी देना सूरा कारा खस्तेशी सहीशुआ सूरा output create कबलेशी. Is it? That is simply known as process model. The efficiency of an organization, the capability of an organization, transformation process in converting inputs to output. No matlab andaha scarce resources na transformation matlab da change from one point to another point. Us da kamchi resources taken by the organization as a scarce, that can be taken as an input, and how organization can get clear produce more output from these scarce resources. So that model is simply known as your process model. Now system model sirf da way gora dekhe confuse ki gayi, it's a very simple concept. Che organization aga ability che kambut resources organization koshish ki che tarla saki aw yo dali che tarla saki no bya dina sanga gata akhasteshi, is it zyata gata akhasteshi. That is known as your process model. और ब्या देना अलावा मुंग सरा यो मल्टी डायमेंशन प्रोसेस समझते दे, which is known as multiple constituents model. Constituents मतलब दा स्टेक होल्डर ये संगा कम्बुत रिसोर्सेज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन तरला सकड़ो सिस्टम मॉडल अगे न संगा ज्यादा गटा अखस्तल कीगी सहीशुला प्रोसेस मॉडल और ब्या देना सहीशुला स्टेक होल्डर तक कस्टमर्स सहीशुला नीड्स या एम्प्लॉइज नीड्स कस्टमर्स नीड्स सहीशुला या सोरा हम स्टेक होल्डर्स ही इन्वेस्टर फॉर एग्जांपल डीलर सप्लायर एनवायरनमेंट दे नीड्स that so hada pura kawaleshi, and that is known as your multiple constituents model. Constituent means stakeholder. The effectiveness of the organization in meeting each constituents मतलब stakeholder needs. صحیح شو دا درې ماډل مونږ ما تاسو له ایکسپلین کړلې چې once صحیح شو scarce resources should be then getting more output from these scarce sources, clear, that is your process model, and then from this organization should provide clear or fulfill all the needs of all the stakeholders, and that model is known as your multiple constituents model. Hope inshallah idea will be clear. Now we have types of controlling. So तरीके दी controlling. Yow de very simple feed forward control. What is feed forward? Feed forward mean advance के controlling cover. Take some measurements in advance. सही शवा? लका मतलब यों कार कवरू ना पहला चकम दे सही शवा अमुंग यों दासे measurements वालू चे that can control. Is it like for example? गुरा यों company दा आगा company चाला order वर्की चे मादे पारा सीमट जोड़ के. अब for cement clear there are some standards are defined, production standards दी. सही शवा? अब for example आगा company चे कम दे they follow clear the standard for the production of the cement. अब in advance when they are following the standards and they will produce the cement according to those standards. So in advance सही शवा अगी सो उकरला अगी controlling उकरला because they follow all the standard in advance. सही शवा? नो जितना सवाई मा suppose जितना let's suppose study कवल वारी. Is it you want to get more marks in management subject. This is also just for example 3 hours or 4 hour daily study kawai. What does it mean? It means that in advance you have followed clear some rules and regulations. You have followed, let's suppose, some anticipated preventions. These are simply known as anticipated prevention. Now shuruna chistasu come, let's suppose basics rawakhas the rules to follow krale sexuala, that controlling is known as feed forward control. Matlab in advance come controlling techniques follow kigi ya basic follow kigi, that is known as feed forward control. A control that prevents anticipated problems before actual occurrence of the problem. मतलब problem पैदा की दो ना पहला सही हुआ सास हो गई दे पारा standards वाली सही हुआ controlling steps वाली. Like for example building in quality through design सही हुआ requiring suppliers conform to ISO. like संग चमा सास हो में चुगोरा your company order work करी we need a quality product, we need a quality design. अब दे पारा चे कम suppliers दे सही हुआ they already follow the ISO standards. ISO mean that is an organization which established some standards for production, international standard organization. No उस चे कम organization order दे सही हुआ supplier will follow the ISO standards in advance. वाले चे this ISO standards सही हुआ advance के चे follow की, so definitely the designs सही हुआ and the product will be about the quality. No in advance चे कम for example controlling basics follow kigi, that is simply known as your feed forward control. Bya we have the concurrent control. अब concurrent by the name it is clear continuous. अक्सर बतासो लीदली चुगुरा organizations के डेर मैनेजरान सही हुआ अगुई गर्जी रा गर्जी कम से मसला ही ऑन द स्पॉट चदे मसला हल की बिया मखकीजी बिया गोरी सही हुआ some supervisors managers they basically check or you can say that they basically do the round inside the organization, and during their round they will find out that either things are with according to the plan or not. If they feel that there is a deviation, there is a change, so then they definitely take the corrective action. So during the process or during continuity or during their round when they do the continuous for example process and they continuously check the things and then they do on the spot some corrective action, so such controls are known as your concurrent control. So a control that take place while the monitored activity is in progress, matlab they basically do the monitoring but continuous monitoring, in progress monitoring. मतलब like उस direct round मन यो कस राशि सही हुआ वहाँ चाहे activity सही रवान दी का सही नदी रवान. तो that controlling चिकम दे that is known as your concurrent controlling या देता continuous controlling हम हुई सही हुआ मतलब progression के रवान दे. And then by the name it is clear feedback control. Feedback मतलब once the thing is done, now you are getting feedback from the people and then clear for the future you will get ready. That control is known as feedback. Like for example my course मुकम्मल ख़त्म करो उस तासु तवाया मा at the end of the course if you have any confusion you may put forward the question. अब it means उस चीज़े हर यो चीज़ ख़त्म शो now तासु ना feedback आखला मा और next time चीज़े I will get ready. No that चीज़े that is simply known as your feedback control. A control that takes place after an activity is done. Matlab once the activity done shola upon the feedback from the respondent, and then actions are to be taken. Hope inshallah idea will be clear. So corrective actions is after the fact, when the problem already has occurred. So simply what a forward matlab da in advance controlling. Bya concurrent de matlab during continuous ya in progression chikam de controlling technique akhasal kigi. When deviation is occurred, directly steps to be taken to control that deviation. Our feedback chikam de once problem is occurred, now from the feedback at the end of the problem ushwala, now we are going to take the control next time unashi. That is known as your feedback control. Another concept है चुगुरा feed forward control मतलब advance anticipation problem या problem face शवे ना दे advance के लगे we are getting prepare ourselves. ब्यादे we have concurrent control corrects problems as they happen. जैसा happen कीगी सही happen कर दो सारा directly take the action to solve them. और ब्या feedback control दे corrects problem after they occur मतलब यो जरी मसला राला ब्या च दे proper feedback ना पास we will follow the let's suppose rules and regulation to control the problem. Hope inshallah idea balaga tasula clear shabi humwi. Ab now that comes as I told you some standards. No standards ke math of the which we have some financial standards. We have some financial controls. Ab financial controls ke sidi traditional controls ke we have the ratio analysis, we have the leverage, profitability, activity, liquidity analysis. All these are the different financial analysis. So with the help of which you can control clear the financial issues. Biadina ilawa budget analysis hum ki deshi. Is it a budget analysis ke like for example what about our budget, what about my expectations, zama budget surah de, zama expectation surah di, or zama expenses surah di. If the expenses are out of my budget, no matlab da show that is over financing ushwala zyad paise ulagi de masraf zyad show. If let's suppose expectations today budget chikam de expenses chikam de they are below the expectations ya damachi sura budget ho expenses again kam rale, so that is simply known as your under budget. So first controlling chikam de ya first standard chikam de that is your financial control. Financial chikam de mum controlling kawale. Then we have balance scored. Awal khazita sto what is balance scored? What a balance scored is a technique. It's a controlling technique that where management or organization or managers they basically focus to measure the four areas: the financial, the customer, the internal processes, and the people, is it, and growth of the assets. So they have to basically control that either they are performing well in different these four areas or not. Us the question that are the four areas they must be equally, let's suppose, balance treated. It doesn't mean financially they are sound, but internal processes they are weak. Customer wise they are good, but people, for example employees, innovation, growth wise they are letting down themselves. No, doesn't mean. So that is balance scored. What balance score chikam de da mung sara yaw controlling technique de no isham na de. Now look at here, it is a measurement tool that uses goals set by managers in four areas to measure companies' performances. As I told you, financial, customer, internal processes, and growth, assets, innovations, etc. Now balance score is intended to emphasize focus that all of these areas are important to an organization's success and that there should be a balance among them. Matlab chesanga maasa huwe chugura all these four areas are important to the organization. It doesn't mean that organization will give more control on financial issues and less control on the internal processes. Yeah, more concentration on the customer issues and less concentration on the growth asset or people or innovation on training program. No, whatever the importance is given, value is given to the financial issues, same will be given to the innovation issues as well. Same will be given to the customer. All the four will be balanced. There must be a balancing among them. Now that all the four aspects, all the four areas, it basically explain the company's performances. So there must be a balance between all the four areas to capture the performance of the organization. This method, this technique is known as your balance scorecard. Dita munga wayu balance scorecard technique. Da hum yo controlling technique de. Byade mungsara information control. Is it? By the name it is clear, information control. As a tool to help managers to control other organizational activities. Managers need the right information at the right time and in the right amount. Simply چې کوم information دغه organization کې منیجرانو سره دی it must be valid. صحیح شو کوم چې statistical reports دي it must be valid. کوم چې for example observation دي صحیح شو it must be valid. دینه علاوه چې کوم recorded data ده performance evaluation system چې کوم دی it must be valid. بهر نه چې کوم information روانه ده صحیح شو the informational role چې کوم منیجرانو دی for example spokesperson information provide کوي dissemination صحیح شو دینه علاوه نورم ډیر زیات انفارمیشن دی صحیح شو نو باید چې دا انفارمیشن چې کوم دی دا هم کنټرول شي صحیح شو یا دا هم یو کنټرول دی انفارمیشن valid information. Ab in an organizational area the managers need to control. Manager must have comprehensive and secure controls in place to protect the organization's important information. څنګه control کولی شي through the management information system. Simply what is management information system? Management information system MIS that is a database. صحیح شو اوس database کې باید هر یو information چې کوم دی دا دغه شي store شي and it must be valid. صحیح شو that is اوس ګوره management information system دا customer department هم استفاده کوي. management information system na HR هم استفاده کوي by the name of human resource information system and management information system na چې کوم دی تاسو financial department هم استفاده کوي. So whatever the information is stored it must be valid. صحیح شو نو دا هم یو controlling information دی. باقي data او information دا خو فرق تاسو ته پته ده. data is the raw form صحیح شو and when it is organized it is simply known as your information simply. Now the last we have the benchmarking. अब अव्वल खुदा दा what is benchmark? Benchmark simply that is a fine standard या देता मुंगा standard of excellence समवयु. Standard of excellence mean that is a fine a बिल्कुल clear crystal clear चकम standard दे आगे ता मुंग वयु benchmark. Simply stated benchmark is a fine a standard of excellence again which to measure and compare. यो दास standard दे सही हुआ कि दे सर मुंगा comparison को da ko benchmark de. Benchmark is a standard. What is benchmarking? Simply Nugura benchmarking Muzita will explain it is basically a process. That's it. Benchmarking is a process. Process so what does it mean? That benchmarking is simply and it is an approach process for setting goals and productivity measures based on the best industry practices. Simply. So is the search for the best practices among competitors or non-competitors that lead to their superior performances. तो गुरा what is benchmarking? Benchmarking simply मतलब दारे जो गुरा benchmarking दास standard set कई organization दास standard set कई चे आगा standard चे कम दे that is more fine, that is more accurate. सही हुआ और बे आगा पर मुताबिक पल चे कम performance दे check कई यानी simply stated it can be from the competitors, it can be from the non-competitors. That is basically industry analysis. Now let me give an example. Inshallah idea that's clear. Suppose there are different organizations inside the market. Now suppose Apple chekam de, which chekam hiring process de. Yeah, suppose Apple chekam advertising process de. That is very fine. Apple pashante advertising your company hum na kai. Suppose it's just an example. Ab when I am saying che Apple sanga advertisement kai kana that is a standard for us. Ab now I have to compare my advertisement clear with the Apple advertisement. Is it? Ab Apple is doing a best industry practicing advertising clear inside the market. Ab that is a ideal for me. So when this benchmarking that come bench de the fine the clear cluster let's suppose standard that is simply known as a benchmark. So where a process where the company match clear its industry practices with the rest of the other industry practices with the benchmark. So this process is simply known as your benchmarking. Now so the definition it is the search for the best practices among competitors and non-competitors matlab industry practices I'm talking about that lead to the superior performances. It is also a control tool for identifying and measuring specific performances gaps and areas for improvement. So hope inshallah idea will be clear to you. So this was the end of the course and thank you so much.